Today's World Insight. Timely, accurate information in time of pandemic. The cure for misinformation going viral? Is media the problem or the solution? And a documentary on the ties that bind the Chinese and Americans. The lowdown on Better Angels from the film director and producer.
These two great countries can rise together if the leadership of both countries figure out the policies for that to happen.
Here's our host, Tian Wei.
Hello and welcome to World Insight. I'm Tian Wei in Beijing. The COVID-19 pandemic swept across the world with more than 20 million confirmed cases and up to 800,000 deaths. Worldwide, governments set up quarantines and carried out social distancing to stop infections. Mass media and social media platforms play a crucial role in providing accurate and timely information on the pandemic. Since little was known about COVID-19 back in the early days, fake news, misinformation, and rumors sent people into panic and making irrational decisions. The rapid spread of misinformation on social media platforms such as Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube worried public health authorities. What role, indeed, does media play amid this pandemic? What can be done to stop the outbreak of misinformation? Let's loop in our panelists from different parts of the world. For more on the role of the media amid the COVID-19 pandemic, we are joined from all over the world. You can see they are in different occasions. Wang Yiwei, the director of the Institute of International Affairs at Renmin University, Jose Luis Manzano, a major shareholder of Grupo America, the second biggest buy-side Argentine media group he co-founded in 1996, and Adriano de Sandes, the director of the Experimental Center of Cinematography in Rome. Meanwhile, we also have Peter Finbright, who is the San Francisco Chronicle's lead science reporter. One thing here for a small note, we have the Mr. Manzano, Mr. De Santis, and Professor Wang. All of them are with the think tank, the Belt and Road Media Community. I want to welcome to all of you. First of all, gentlemen, I want you to give me some idea of how you would assess the role of the media. If you think the role of the media during the pandemic is satisfactory, you raise your hand. Let's have a survey. Voila, no one. Oh, there's one. Pete, do you want to raise your hand or not?
Well, yeah, I'm raising my hand because the role of the media is to provide information, and I think, and accurate information. It can always be better, and there's always going to be criticism of the media. And in a global pandemic like this, where information is changing constantly, it's going to be difficult. So. No, you can never be satisfied with everything, and you should never be satisfied. But the effort should be to continue to improve and to always get the best information and most accurate that you can.
Okay, so Peter raised his hand. Is there anyone else that's raising the hand that I didn't see clearly? Okay, so 3-1. The other three gentlemen are not satisfied with the media's role over the time of the pandemic. Just remember, Peter is a journalist in practice. He's working for the San Francisco Chronicle, covered every beat over the past decades he worked there. What about the other three gentlemen? Let me ask Mr. Manzano, your thoughts.
Yeah, it's well, I'm not satisfied because the media got taken by surprise, got captured in the middle of a political and geopolitical battle, and got captured in every country into ideological approaches, even very unscientific approaches to it. So the leadership on the countries was not clear enough beyond their frontiers inside each country, the leadership behave better or worse, and then the media cover that like a soccer match, and also open the window to tons and tons and unscientific opinions and things. So when you put together the lack of global leadership, the not uniform flow of information, plus biased media and very opinionated media with ideological bias, media contributed to many of the mistakes. Media contributed to thousands of Americans in the beach. Media contributed to thousands of Spanish going back to the beach last week and getting sick. So we could have done better.
Professor Wang Yiwei, what do you think? You're coming from the academic world among the four of you. You didn't raise your hand. You're not satisfied with the role of the media over the past 8 months or so of the pandemic. Tell me more about what you think.
Well, it's very difficult because the media in China and abroad may be differently. And most importantly, the people live in a difficult time. They have a very bad temper with a psychology problem. People are easy to blame anything, anybody, including the media. So you cannot make a judgment during this difficult time. And secondly, because people cannot travel, just close the door and use the internet, WhatsApp or WeChat. So this media is overload responsibility for the pandemic. So it's not a traditional role of the media should play.
Interesting. Mr. DeSantis, tell me more about your thoughts. You didn't raise your hand either.
We lost the chance to work all together, and I talk in an international way, putting all the countries together, sharing the right, the correct, and the non-fake communication. And the pandemic, what we lived with the COVID, was so bad, it was so dangerous, and therefore I think it was the chance to work together when we talk about communication. But it happened the opposite. So for that reason, I'm absolutely not happy, because many different interests came out, and not only worldwide, but also in Europe. You know, also the European community, which should have been together, working together. Each country went in its own direction, and there was not a common thought about what was happening and the common strategy.
Even there are so many different changes in the world happening at the same time, also unprecedented. But the role of the media claiming itself to be, quote unquote, the fourth force of the society, is the role of the media still what it advocated it should be? Then let me go to the only reporter among this group, Mr. Finwright.
You cannot compare a newspaper reporting a pandemic to an opinion pundit on television, because they're going to be covering it in a different way. And also, social media plays a huge part in this as well. And social media, they don't, you know, many don't have any standards of journalism that are typical of, you know, of a mainstream newspaper. So, I mean, in this world, we have so many different forms of media. I think the key is that people focus on the trustworthy ones, and because there are some that aren't trustworthy, frankly, and it's not necessarily newspapers, but social media, blogs, so many ways people communicate now that has changed, and we're in that climate.
Peter, just to be fair,
yeah, go ahead.
When you are saying some are trustworthy, well, others may not be trustworthy. So here comes the thing. What kind of standards are you using, or anyone is using, to describe some media organization or individuals or platforms are trustworthy or not. I want to ask that question to Mr. De Sandes, since you are working on cinematography and working on movies, and which might be having a little bit different standards compared to what Peter is doing every day. Tell me more about your thoughts of the role of the media should be at least.
Yeah, I think, when we talk about media these days, now we are talking about communication. And if you compare everything to the past, everything is more difficult because we've got so many platforms, so many social media, and so many fake news. So it's very, very difficult to give the right information. For that reason, people tend to be very confused, or maybe tend to have a wrong idea about what's happening. And specifically, I think that obviously the future is to communicate through the video, through reportage. And for that reason, I think that we need, as I work on training, we work, on that field. I think we should train the new students, the young people, on one side to produce the right information, the right video products about information, but at the same time we also need to train and to teach the young people, to understand to try to understand find the correct information.
When you see geopolitics these days, is quite taking all the attention of politicians. And politicians used to be a great source for media coverage about what's going on in the world. So now here's some of the tricky part, which is whether the politicians are trustworthy or not anymore, and whether governance within various societies should be trusted or not. And then there's also the issue about the relationship between political parties, politicians, and also the funding and the source of the media. Very complicated structure, Professor.
Well, I think the media should be balanced between the scientific and cynic responsibilities, and also take the balanced role between domestic and international politics. The first balance showed the story that 20 years ago, if you Google or Baidu suicide, they can show you at least 20 ways to kill yourself. So it's very scientific. But now, if you Google and Baidu suicide, the first emergent call you need to seek the help is not to show you how to kill yourself. I think that's the social responsibility. It's not just about science, what the meaning of the suicide. In the pandemic crisis, I think the media also should keep a balance of what it is and what should tell to the truth. And secondly, of course, domestic, international also should be balanced. What happened domestically, we need to tell the people and also to tell the world. At the same time, we also need to make differences that the news politicize, stigma, spotlight between like U.S. and China, confrontation. So this makes the people difficult to tell the truth from the scientific observation, or how to get out from the geopolitics rival to tell what happened differently, how to shape the diplomatic relations.
Okay. Whether we should have the notion that the media will be able to rise above all the political differences and the societal, traditional, cultural differences, and be able to do their own independent work, and have enough resources to do that. Or media, by nature, is being driven by the surroundings and definitely will be hugely impacted by the environment in which it exists. So it sounds a little bit philosophical or abstract, but I know after running media organizations for years, for decades, Mr. Manzano, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
let me first, I will refer to something that Peter was saying.
Okay.
Is when you know your role and you know what you want to do, and you stick to it. It's go like to Ulysses sticking to the boat instead of going to the silence. They say you stick to it. So you try, in any situation, you try to produce objective, unbiased, check, double check, triple check information, and with that you create a flow that go to your readers or your viewers and gets it back, and you survive basically getting the support of your followers. Then obviously there is a bias. There is always a bias. And these extreme situations challenge your to try to provide an unbiased coverage. And how challenge? It challenges for politics, it challenges for financial reasons, but it also challenges because of prejudice and ignorance and fear. So for us it has been very, very challenging, and we had to adopt an editorial position supporting the quarantine. And we had to support the quarantine, and that became political. We had to support the quarantine. And we had to support the quarantine because our health system is weak. So if we couldn't support the quarantine, we will count the death in thousands very fast. And that is scientific. And we had to have the chairman of our group talking to individual journalists that had their opinion. They didn't believe in the virus. They didn't believe in the quarantine. And they had the prime time. So the boss had to tell them, listen, unfortunately, please differentiate what is your opinion, what is the proven scientific approach to it. That is, if we do not quarantine, we don't have enough respirators. So the challenge is, in this time, is you have to stick to your values.
On the other hand, Mr. DeSantis, for example, there's also the trend of the media that as long as there's more drama, as long as there is more attention and eyeballs, you're successful.
Everything these days must be spectacular because everybody is so used, so in touch with communication, with video, with all these products all the time, so that when you give also a real, a very good, a true information, you must be spectacular, otherwise nobody will hear you. So that's another big problem, so I agree.
Mr. Tim Wright, if you could be brief, tell me about your thoughts.
We live in the society. I mean, I have had to shelter in place for months now, and I wear masks every time I go out. So, I mean, I work for the media, and we live in the society we live in. So we're experiencing it too. So, I mean, yes, I cover science. I cover the scientific reports, and I talk to scientists every day. So I'm not trying to be spectacular. I'm trying to report what they say accurately and well, and in writing that is lively, of course. When spectacular things happen and it's reported in the media gets blamed for reporting spectacular things. But I mean, when the president says something controversial, we're going to cover it. When there's bad information about some science that makes things look dangerous, we're going to cover that. So it's not hyping it; it's being as accurate as we can.
Professor Wang, also your final words. Even though you are not a media practitioner, but I'm sure you are. In the receiving side and the academic side?
Well, I think we should make differences between politics and culture, even they are strongly connected. Many Western media blame so-called disinformation about Chinese. This is a misunderstanding or discrimination about Chinese culture. It's not just the Chinese model of Chinese politics. You know, the Japan, South Korea, Singapore, China prefers collectivism and also order, and also maybe neutralism, and not just too much like the Americans, individualism or liberty, and or maybe trust, not so much trust the government. So the Eastern civilization more trust the government. So this culture, I think, political culture is more important. Many medias put this as ideology, as the political system differences. I think that's misguiding of the media.
I want to thank all of you to playing your role as much as you can in the right way over the past 8 months. Thank you so much for your input, Wang Yiwei, Jose Luis Manzano, Adriano De Sandes, and Peter Fimwright. Really appreciate it. Be well and be safe. And stay with us here on World Insights, still to come on our program.